Hi, and welcome to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money, and investing. I'm your host, Richardson from OTG Capital. We broadcast locally on Radio Northern Beaches, on the sunny northern beaches of Sydney. We're also syndicated to 15 other stations on the community radio network around Australia, complements of the Community Broadcasting Association of Australia. We are really pleased to welcome back to the microphone again Jen Richardson. Jen runs her own accounting practice as well as doing financial education content. And very quickly on that financial content, we are proudly sponsored by my company, OTG Capital. I'm required to tell you that. So that's the paid piece over and done with. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, and I love being here with you, Ray.
I got to say the reaction to the last couple of shows we did was really good. We've been talking on Dollars Making Sense a lot about women and money and financial stress, financial abuse, not just of elders, but also of women going through divorce, separations, horrible domestic violence situations, and money can sometimes be very helpful, but is also a weapon. It can get weaponized as well. So we've covered a lot of these, and I guess it's always good to hear again the messages and again your perspective about how you go out and start teaching and training and I guess generating content that people hopefully will read and garner some really good information. But before we get stuck in, I wanted to read to the audience the opening piece from your blog. You're at the kitchen table late at night trying to work out whether you can afford to keep the house. The numbers won't quite add up, and the worst part is that you isn't really about the numbers. It's your home. It's the kids' school run, the last thing that feels solid, and a spreadsheet is telling you it just might have to go. If your finances feel like they're crushing you right now, there's a plain reason for it, and it isn't that you've done something wrong. The maths have changed overnight. Two incomes became one, and one household has now stretched into two. All of this lands at the exact moment you've got the least in your tank and when you're grieving the life that you thought you'd have. Now, that's the backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, that Jen has written in this blog piece, and I think it's incredibly telling. The maths don't lie. One house becomes two, two incomes become one, and the numbers just don't add up. Jen, how real is this on a day-to-day basis in what you have experienced in your life in the Hunter region and dealing with clients and people that have to face this?
It's very real, and it's one of the things that so many people do forget about. You know, all of a sudden we have half a house to go and buy a whole house with. We have trying to work out how we survive on the income that we now have. And the emotional toll that goes with that, because as we know, home is where your heart is. And so particularly when you've got younger children, more so than I find when the children have left the home, you know, that emotional tie isn't there so much. But when you have young children, it's always been the safety place, hasn't it? You know, we have this crazy world we live in where you work, you're dealing with, you know, whoever you deal with in your daily work life, whether that be consumers or customers or whatever it is. And you escape that and you come home to this place that, you know, it's chaotic, but it feels very grounded and the emotional ties are there. And, you know, it's a place where you can let everything flow, you know, the emotions of the day you can let go of, you can just relax into the night and enjoy family. And all of a sudden that place may not exist anymore. And that's the harsh reality, particularly for women. I found when I have dealt with this through, you know, my accounting practice here, men aren't so emotionally tied to the house as women are. And I think that is part of the problem when women sit down at that kitchen table to see if they can afford to keep the house, that's when they get overwhelmed by the loss. So not only the loss of the life that they thought they were going to have, because nobody's ever gone into a marriage and, you know, even if it's not a legal marriage, but, you know, the marriage of two people and sat there and gone, yeah, when I'm 50, I'm going to be divorced. You know, we all go into it and we have this picture of what life is going to be. You know, we're going to have the white picket fence with the 2.2 children. we're going to travel, we're going to do all these things, and we're going to live a long, healthy, happy life. The reality of divorce shatters that dream, and it's a dream that a lot of these women had held on to for a lot of years. And so all of a sudden, all that emotion comes out, and then they realize that they're also probably going to lose the home as well. Sometimes it's not worth keeping the home. It's lovely if you can, and I get that you want that emotional security to still be there, but sometimes it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I must say, I can't speak from personal experience. I've been married for 37 odd years and been very fortunate. Having been a senior member of our local P&C at our primary school and on many, many committees, cooked many sausages, I have watched many of our friends, couples, disintegrate over the years, and that old statistics of 50% will end up divorced, I think rang pretty true through our community. And I saw good divorces, if you can have that, I guess. I saw people that were able to split amicably and sit around a kitchen table and work things out very, very nicely, and there were kids involved. And I've seen the exact opposite, where it's just the war of the roses. It's just knives at 10 paces and no weapon is beyond use. And I've seen the ugliest of behaviour from either sex. It doesn't really, I think it delineates, but I think the numbers that you've quoted in your blog unfortunately ring true, is that the financial impact of divorce tends to fall far heavier on the woman than it does on the man. And we've had you on the show, and I've had many other presenters on the show talk about the impact on women's super, and just through childbearing alone, that has enormous impact. But divorce does that again over and over. So again, I think you've impacted here. An average woman's household income drops by around 29% after separation, while a men's drops only by 5%. That's a really damning statistic when you think about it. So let's take a couple of steps back. We're facing this situation. We are divorcing. There's nothing that can be done, irreconcilable. What do you say to your clients as that first step?
Well, the first step we always say is get your own financial independence. So, the very first step, of course, is go and open up a separate bank account just in your name. Because a lot of times we have, and, I'm like you, I'm very happily married, have been married now 29 years. Everything that my husband and I have is entwined. We don't have separate
likewise
accounts.
Yeah, everything's exactly entwined. Yep.
But yeah, the first thing to do is go and get your own bank account. Go and get your pay transferred into that new bank account so that you have control over what money is spent. Now, even in the most happiest of divorces, if that is a thing, there is still that doubt whether somebody's touched your money and everything, but it is about the financial clarity. Go get your own bank account. Money goes in. You know what you've got to pay. You know what you've got there to spend. So we have to make these decisions at the most emotional time of our life. A divorce is emotional, even if you both agree that, we're going to do this nice, happy separation. It's still emotional because, as we said at the start of the show, the life that you dreamt of that was going to happen has now been shattered. That dream or that picture of what a happy life is. So you should also, go and change your beneficiaries on your superannuation fund, because, of course, superannuation, if the unthinkable happens and something happens to you in between that separation and divorce, or even in divorce, if you have nominated your now estranged partner, they will get your superannuation. And yes, they might be lovely and then make sure that your children get it. But some of them may have left for somebody else and, goes down the wrong stream. So certainly just those simple things like that, they're the first steps. And we always say, do the things that you need to do now, park everything until when you're in a better emotional state. Because no divorce, no separation, anything when it comes to money is going to happen overnight. So do the first step and just know that you've got those things covered. Obviously, what we would always say to everybody is do your budget. Now, I know nobody likes a budget, but you're going to have to work out where you spend. And I'm not talking a budget because, I'm anti-budgets as such, but you need to know where you're spending, what money you've got available, how you can survive on what you now have. Because as those statistics say, your income, if you're a female, has suddenly dropped significantly. And that's a factor of the gender pay gap. It's a factor of that women don't work the hours that men work. And it's really interesting, Ray. I was talking to last night, sitting on the lounge, talking to my middle son's partner, girlfriend, whatever you want to call her.
Woman of equal distinction.
Yes. And she was saying that one of the ladies that she works with, husband suddenly passed away and she'd had to go back to work full time. She hadn't worked full time for a lot of years. But, and of course, my comment was, did he have any income protection? Was there any life insurance that they could get? And she obviously didn't know that answer, and it wasn't something that she wanted to dig into. But she was saying, she's now had to go back to work because she's suddenly single. Not through any fault of her own and not through a marriage breakdown, but it's the same emotional trauma. And then we say, find out what assets you have. And this is about when you are emotionally ready. Don't try to do it in that first week or that first 2 weeks when you're struggling with everything. But sit down and work out what assets you have, what he had or your partner had, and what you had together. And make sure that you have that, because knowing where you stand when you go into negotiations, even if it's just you want to do it amicably across the kitchen table, having the information at hand gives you much more clarity, much more clear distinction on what you're negotiating with. And make sure you pull in your superannuation funds that you both have, because that is an asset that is used as part of the family split up.
Yeah, we'll catch up with that in the second half of the show. And speaking of, you're here on Dollars Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. I have Jen Richardson at the microphone and camera this week. And we are at halftime. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back with you in just a moment. Hi, and thank you for listening to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly radio program about finance, money and investing on Radio Northern Beaches and nationally on the Community Radio Network around Australia. The views, comments and opinions aired during our program should not be construed or viewed as financial advice. Any commentary is general advice only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. You should consider whether the advice is suitable for you and your personal circumstances. If in doubt, you should contact an authorised licensed financial planner. We welcome questions and feedback, and you can get in touch with us via our blog, social media channels or email. Please search for Dollars and Making Sense in your favourite podcast platform or check out our blog at otgcapital.com.au/blog. Hi, and welcome back to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. This week, we are talking with Jen Richardson, who is a content creator around financial education. She's based up in the Hunter Valley region in lovely sunny Newcastle, a clime I used to live in many, many years ago. Great part of the world. If you haven't been there, ladies and gents, please go. Just a quick plug for the tourist board there, but they don't sponsor us, but I'm just saying it's a great place to go. But look, Jen, before we went to the break, we were talking about a split, an unfortunate situation. I think one of the things that you've pointed out in your blog is that we shouldn't rush. And I think maybe sometimes people feel that there is this rush. And I guess one of the big things you're talking about is draw breath. What do you mean by that?
Well, when we're going through an emotional state, we're already heightened and we want to get, we've got chaotic in our life and we want to get stability back in our life. That's a human function. We don't like change. We don't like things that are different. And so most of what you need to do, obviously you need to work out your immediate situation. How are you going to live? Where are you going to live? What things need to happen? Particularly, as I said, through all of this, if there's young children involved, you need to get those things in place quickly. But drawing breath is about stopping and going, I've done the immediate things that I need to do. Now it's a process of doing nothing while I get my head straight, while I get my emotions in check, while I can think logically. Because What we've seen in the past is when people are in a heightened state of emotions, you don't make very good, clear decisions because the emotional side of our brain does it rather than our logical side of the brain.
Sure.
And I've seen lots of women who post-divorce or post-separation and wind up with things just say to me, I probably should have gone for more because he's now living this wonderful life because their income hasn't cut so much. And I've got to live longer and I've got the kids more often. And, yes, he's paying child support, but I still have a lot more of the expenses. And so many times, I'm not saying to do it to end up in a fractured relationship with your ex, but so many times we do things just to try and keep the peace because,
they don't want the confrontation.
And you don't want the kids seeing their parents, who's going to be their parents for life. And you are connected to that ex-partner for the rest of your life through your children, grandchildren, or whatever. So it is nice if you just both agree. And I think this is where a lot of people come unstuck. They think that, let's get this all done, get it out the way, and we can move on with our lives. The process of stopping and agreeing with each other that let's give each other a few months to adapt to a new normal. Then we'll sit down and we can do this without the emotions. And of course, when we negotiate without emotional connection, we do negotiate better and we will not be quite so heightened in our responses, which means we're not probably going to move into that argumentative stage. And we make logical decisions about what is best for both of us. And if there's kids involved, what is also good for those children.
I guess the question that's been nagging in the back of my head, and given that I'm not a counsellor, I've never been, in the melee of a couple going through a separation or divorce, given your experience in having to maybe untangle a financial mess or help people do their books or do a goods and chattels split or whatever the case may be, how different is the perspective if the person that you're representing is the cheater rather than the cheatee?
Yeah, two different emotions that we've seen. So when we've looked after people that are the one that was the cheater, sometimes they can feel the one extent that they feel incredibly guilty that they've ruined the happy life that they have. And sometimes they will want a reconciliation and their partner just says, no, because I'll never trust you again. And so what we find there is, again, there's always two sides of every coin. When we go down that one where the person feels guilty, they want to give away as much as they can because they think if the financial side is looked after, then everything will be happy and they've made amends for where it is.
Right.
Then they've got the person who was cheated on that can go one of two ways. And we just did this one recently with somebody. So it's very close to home, this. She wanted everything because in her mind, he ruined the dream for her. And it was such an emotionally charged divorce and separation and court drag out. And that kept coming up in conversation. I didn't want any of this. I want this now because, the life I was going to have was very comfortable and now it's not. You've ruined everything. And it was emotionally charged. Even after the divorce, this one was probably one we could never have parked and had the non-emotional side. She is a very emotional person anyway, at the best of times. But when we parked it for a while with her, she came back to the table much more in agreement with some things. We sat down with her from a financial planning point of view, and I still have my financial planning license at that stage. And this is your total assets. Your children are adults now. This is what you want to negotiate to have. And she desperately wanted to keep the family home. She still had one of her adult children still living there. And so when we sat down with that, we went, right, well, now this is what's important to you. Let's work out the rest. But then the flip side of it is, going back to the two coins of the cheater, is if they've gone, I was never happy anyway, and I haven't been happy for a long time, now I am, they can be very unemotional because their emotion now is tied to this new relationship. So they can be very black and white.
Very clinical.
Yes. And that's really difficult depending on the circumstances of the other people. So we always find it's both how people are reacting. Sometimes
Sure.
people have got to that stage, and as a couple, we're going, we live like brother and sister now. Let's just go. And it is much more clinical and works very well.
Yeah, I was just curious, that perspective, because again, I'm a man, and from what I've seen, more often than not, it's the Y chromosome that goes wandering off into the ULA, and the X chromosome is left there scratching their heads with the kids sort of going, what the hell happened? That's been my experience.
Statistics agree with that though, but anyway.
I don't know. I'm not an expert. So look, one of the things you mentioned before we went to the break, and I want to come back to it now, and one of the assets that, and interestingly now, the world is noticing as well, is that superannuation is up there, probably equal now to the house when it comes to value. How do people forget?
Well, I think what we find when I'm doing all my financial literacy education is superannuation is this thing that is just for somewhere later on in life.
Right.
And it's one of the frustrations I have as a financial educator is that people don't look at their superannuation as their money because it is for retirement. We can't get my hands on it. It's just in the nether, and we'll worry about that when we get closer. And so I think when we go to the separation stage, that thing is still, I can't access it, I can't get it. Not realizing that you can obviously do a split. You can't get the money out of superannuation, but your partners can split some of their superannuation across to yours because, in retirement, if you had stayed together and had that, happy little household with the white picket fence, those superannuation accounts become one, really, because it's like everything else. The money just comes into the family. But in separation, so many people go, oh, well, that's his and we can't access it till they're 60. This is mine and I can't access it till I'm 60. It's locked away. And so that's financial education that people don't realise that in the back end, the courts can have superannuation roll from one person's to another. It still can't get out, but it just rolls from one to the other.
But it's absolutely valuable, and it's got to be considered. One of the things I want to try and finish up on today's discussion, and again, it's just one of those fascinating things that gets, I think, fogged up in the emotions of a split. You've titled a paragraph there, "Get the right people in your corner." Tell me more.
Yeah, look, so many times we go to immediate family that become too emotionally involved. And, in all fairness, when the in-laws and everything get involved, sometimes, particularly your parents might, if you've got young children and they can see the hurt that you or your partner's going through, they get very defensive of you. And that doesn't help with the emotional side of things. So, that's lovely to have that emotional support, but don't let them be involved in everything else. So find somebody who can speak logically to you rather than emotionally to keep you on track. Find, a good friend that can be the emotional support when you need it. But certainly, all these people that, enjoy, all due respect, it's lovely if you can leave the legal system out because they profit very well from separation.
So we're talking family law lawyers.
Family lawyer. At least have one meeting with a family lawyer. And most of them are quite happy to have that meeting to go, you know what, this is what you want to do. Don't drag out not getting involved with a lawyer because they are there from the point of view to help you. And I've done lots of interviews with family lawyers, and every time I talk to one, I learn something new about the divorce process. And, you can get help, you can get support. So if you're a low income earner, they can get money from your spouse to be part of the divorce process. So there's lots of things that can be done. So don't avoid lawyers thinking they are going to cost you a fortune. Yes, they can if you drag this out and dig your toes in and you get silly about the whole process. But it's worthwhile having that discussion. Have a discussion with your accountant or your financial planner if you have one. But take people that can help you through with the knowledge and the clinical point of view, not the emotional. The emotional is great for somebody for your moral support. It's not great when you come to the financial side.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've watched, again, as a spectator from afar in my local community, where mostly women have not taken advice or believed, to be non-confrontational, didn't ask the thorny questions, particularly around things like super, and have learned to regret it later on when all of a sudden, there's a very valuable asset that's been flushed down the gurgler and never to be retrieved. So look, I think probably the way I read your blog, probably the key takeaway I'm reading there is go slow. I think is the big thing that I'm seeing in your wonderful article, and we'll reference this in our blog when we post this to the web. But is there any other message, Jen, that you want to leave with the audience as we finish up?
I think go slow is the most important one. Don't
Right.
feel rushed. These are big decisions that are life impacting.
Mm-hmm.
But the other important issue that you need to keep is the emotional side of it. Things will get better. You're in an emotional state now. Things are quite difficult. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, hopefully your video editor can cut that out.
He will now.
So what we always say is that, keep in mind that this is chaos now. There is clarity at the other side, but you've got to take that positive viewpoint. You've got to look at things rationally and one step at a time. Don't try to do everything all at once. It might be just this week, all I'm going to do is get that bank account set up and get my pay transferred to it and then get my superannuation beneficiary sorted. That's it. Don't try to solve the world in the first week, and give yourself that breathing space so that you can start to think logically and without some of the emotion. I'm not going to say that you can separate the emotion of this because it is a heightened emotion, but it is one step at a time. My last one, and I know you need to wrap up, so I'll make it very quick. Sometimes you just need to think, what is the most important thing for me? And you might need to hand over some of your superannuation in order to keep the family home, or you might take some of their superannuation or investments and be happy to sell the family home and go start somewhere else. So everybody's journey is different, and what suits you is what suits you.
Great advice, Jen Richardson. Thanks so kindly for being on Dollars and Making Sense. And until next time, adios.
Thank you.